heavily armed Hamas terrorists infiltrated into Israeli towns and cities, going door to door, slaughtering and kidnapping innocent Israelis. Additionally, the terrorists launched an extensive attack on Israel through widespread and indiscriminate firing of missiles and rockets at the citizens of Israel from the south to Tel Aviv.
With this scale, unimaginable, it is a September 11 of Israel. It is.
Joined by His Excellency, Israeli Ambassador Ilan Fluss, to delve into the recent conflict initiated by Hamas in Israel. A war that has regrettably seen the death toll rise into the thousands, and Israel has declared an emergency government and mobilized its troops along the borders with Gaza, all while facing reports of potential Hezbollah infiltration from the north, the harrowing atrocities committed by Hamas against Israeli border communities have captured global attention. Welcome to the program, Ambassador Ilan Fluss, and thank you for gracing our program and shedding light on this critical and challenging situation. Ambassador, we are deeply empathetic, sympathetic to the pain and challenges your country and its people are going through right now due to the recent brazen attacks by Hamas. And it's truly heartbreaking to witness such violence. In the words of President Biden, it's been described as sheer evil. Could you for now provide us with a personal perspective on the current situation in Israel and Gaza with a broader context of Israel-Hamas conflict? How are you and your fellow citizens coping with this ongoing crisis?
Thank you for having me, Alma. It's been some time. Yes, I mean, I think President Biden, when he said evil, it's so evil and was so cruel. We were celebrating just last Saturday one of the important Jewish festivals called Simchat Torah. And I was here actually with the community, and then suddenly we get some pieces of news that something is happening in Israel. And then I get a phone call from Israel. And then from there, it just has been a crazy time. First of all, trying to understand the scale of this brutal attack against Israel. And I would like first to describe what happened. Hamas, which is a terror organization, and we can talk about it soon, more than 1,000 operatives, terrorists, were on the borders into Israel. They made their way into Israel by air, by sea, by land, planned terror attack. And the target, the goal, was Israeli civilians living in the communities close to the border with the Gaza Strip. The atrocities, I mean, I would use the term, they were butchers. The atrocities that they have done there, it's just unimaginable. And slowly the stories are coming out. Families were hiding inside their homes. We have a security sheltered room in every house because of the missiles that they shoot at Israel. It's not a new phenomena, shooting missiles. Unfortunately, we're living in a very complicated reality. Families who were hiding inside those sheltered rooms, and what they did, those terrorists, they basically put the house on fire, and these people inside suffocated and burned in the house, and because the terrorists were surrounding the house. I mean, you see pictures of a father in his bed, covering, trying to protect his wife and 3 children, all 5 of them, entire family dead. Sort of really horrific stories. There was a big festival on the beach, a few kilometers from Gaza, very, very close. Unfortunately, more than 3,000 youngsters who were celebrating and dancing, and came those terrorists And you could see the footage. They were all trying to run away. They didn't understand beginning what's happening. There's this loud music and suddenly shooting, missiles, and they were trying to flee, to run away. And those terrorists came and surrounded them, and you see how they surrounded some of them and just shot at them, falling inside onto the ground, into a big hole. They were hiding, trying to hide. There was one person that actually, a friend of mine, who was there, and what she did, I mean, it's a miracle. She lay amongst some dead people, covered herself with blood, and pretended to be dead. And she was lucky because there's a lot of footage. You see those terrorists shooting dead bodies, making sure that they're really dead. So anyway, it's a terrible situation. More than 1,200 people were murdered, were massacred. The organization Hamas, of course, is responsible for that. More than 2,800 people that have been injured. And until now, we're suffering from missiles that have been fired from Gaza just half an hour ago. More missiles were shot towards the central part of Israel. The Hamas is not giving up. It's determined to kill Israelis because they're Israelis, because they are Jewish. And of course, they kidnapped more than 100. There are estimates that the number will grow, but the Israeli Defense Forces are trying to analyze the footage and to really have a better estimation of the number. We're still busy identifying the dead because the bodies some of them you cannot even recognize. So you'd have to use genetic tests in order to identify the dead. Unfortunately, quite a few foreign citizens who were slaughtered, and maybe this is the opportunity really to express my empathy and to send my condolences, especially now to the families of 2 OFWs who were identified yesterday morning or 2 days ago at night. Very unfortunate, and there are still 3 or 4 unaccounted for yet. Of course, Israel will do what it can in order to either identify them or rescue them, because they're amongst other kidnapped people who are from different nationalities, of course, mostly Israelis. So the situation was really bad. We are now in a process of. We have finished the process of stabilization, gaining control of the areas where the terrorists were operating, sort of inside those communities and inside the towns and cities. So they were cleared. I mean, there was fighting, fierce fighting. A lot of soldiers really sacrificed their lives to save people and to try to protect against those terrorists. But the sheer numbers and ammunition and the different weapons they had with them, I mean, they prepared them for a massive, massive invasion. So this is now over. We gained control inside Israel.
Okay.
We have declared in Israel an emergency situation. We have declared war because Hamas basically declared war on Israel. So we need to have the legal process in place in order to fight back, sort of as a war, because when it's a war, we can also recruit a reserve army, because all Israelis are, after we finish the military service, we are part of the reserve army. And we are in the final process of equipping more than 350,000 people have been called back into service. and preparing ourselves. We can talk later about the northern border. So we are now in the final process of putting them, assigning them to the places, north, center, south, of course. Southern part of Israel was announced, the very close area which is in proximity to the border with Gaza was announced closed area for military only now. So we have evacuated the kibbutzim and the communities there. They have been evacuated in order to let the army do the maneuvering. And I guess soon we'll see the real response of the IDF, which until now was focusing on bombing the Hamas infrastructure, and soon we'll talk about this bombing. So we're preparing for the next stage, because for us, with the scale of this attack, we cannot enter into some kind of ceasefire. If you compare it to the size of the population of the country, it is as if 40,000 Americans were murdered in one attack. The scale is unheard of in Israeli history. So we have to make sure there is no more facilities and infrastructure of the terror organization Hamas in order to make sure that we live safely and peacefully in our communities.
President Marcos has expressed, of course, his support. We expressed our support for Israel during these difficult times, demonstrating solidarity with your country. Could you tell us about your personal meeting with President Marcos, and additionally from a personal perspective as well, what steps is Israel taking to ensure the safety and well-being of Filipinos who remain unaccounted for?
Yes, I had, and I really wanted to thank the President. I had a very good meeting with the President yesterday. Of course, I opened with expressing my sympathy and condolences for the two Filipinos who were murdered, together with the Israeli employers. Together, most of the OFWs in Israel are caregivers, so they live together with elderly or disabled people. And I saw a very moving post on Facebook of the son of the employer of one of the Filipinas that she was identified yesterday. And I reposted it on my Facebook. And he said thank you to her for her loyalty and sacrificing her life. She could have run away. And she decided to stay to protect her employer. And she paid with her life. And her employers, she also passed away. And I really told the President that I think for me this is the story of the Filipinos in Israel, because they live with our elderly people. They live in our homes. They are part of the family. Because my father-in-law, he's a Holocaust survivor, 93 years old. He has a Filipina. We, my wife and myself, were here in the Philippines. We cannot visit our father-in-law or my wife's father every day or every week. And it really gives us a lot of confidence and comfort to know that there is somebody with him and she is taking care of him. She lives with him, of course, and she cares about him, and whenever there are issues, so they are part of the family. And this is what I'm saying, we always take care, also we make sure that they're also happy. And I think for that reason, we have close to 30,000 OFWs in Israel. And to the best of my knowledge, there was no request to be repatriated back to the Philippines, because we're giving them the same treatment as we give to Israelis. For an example, about 20 Filipinos were caught in those communities in the south that we knew that they are there, and they were hiding or keeping themselves in these safe rooms from those attacks. And the IDF, even when there was still shooting and violence there, came in and took them out of the war zone, and took them out to Tel Aviv. And they put them in hotels together with the employers. One Filipino who was injured, was hospitalized. Again, Israeli doctors. They're part of us, they're part of our community, they're part of our families. Even they get even the social support. You know that sometimes there's tension. I mean, there's an elderly person living with a Filipino or Filipina, differences of culture. So in case there are issues, they can even call a social worker to come in and help. And we did it a few times, and a social worker comes in and helps in bridging the gap. So we do everything we can. And of course, they have life insurance, they have all the medical insurance. They get all the rights like any other Israeli worker in Israel or any Israeli person. And after, of course, after I expressed my condolences, I briefed the president on the attack itself, on what happened, and I briefed him on what exactly is the Hamas. Because I think this is very, very important to understand. The Hamas is a terror organization which has a charter. When it was established, there's a charter. In the charter, it says that it has to evacuate and to wipe off the map the Zionist entity, because Israel is on a Muslim land. It's the land of Islam, and for that reason you have to murder anybody who is not Muslim who lives on that land. Meaning, in their agenda, in their most important document, they call for wiping Israel off the map and for murdering Israelis and Jewish people. They do it in Israel, they do it abroad. So I briefed him about, and I showed him even the charter. And then, of course, some details on what happened, the atrocities that took place, the Israeli response. And then I showed him about the response of the IDF and how different it is compared to the brutal attack of the Hamas. And I think that's a key issue to understand the conflict. The Hamas targeted civilians and communities. Now, the IDF is the Israeli Defense Forces. Their purpose is, being the Israeli army, is to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel. So when we already started bombing now some of the buildings in Gaza, it's important to understand we're not just firing missiles or from aircrafts, dropping bombs on any building that we can see. No. We're targeting infrastructure and buildings that are belonging and used by Hamas for the terror attacks. So, and we have footage of mosques, of hospitals, of schools, of ambulances, of residential buildings, office buildings, which are actually used by Hamas. And there's footage of an ambulance going out. Operatives, terrorists are going out of the ambulance, firing a rocket towards Israel, and then going back into the ambulance and continue driving as if it's an ambulance.
They're using the ambulance.
Using the ambulance, using the mosques. And second thing that they do is they use the population living in Gaza as a human shield. So they establish their headquarters in a residential building on purpose. So when we are attacking back, and I explained this to the president, we even inform them, make sure you are far from Hamas operatives, because this building is going to be attacked. And now we informed, this is a war, keep a distance, move away, be in places that are not Hamas facilities, because we are now going to bomb. Of course, Hamas leadership They are very well protected, they know, and some of them are hiding under tunnels. We can talk about it later. But what we are doing is we are making sure as much as possible not to hit civilians and people who are not involved, which is exactly the opposite from what the Hamas is doing, which is targeting civilians. And that makes a difference between a terror organization and a responsible army which is doing its best. And then, of course, I talked with the president about the response of the Philippines, and he expressed, obviously, his full support and friendship to Israel, and that's something which we appreciate a lot. And I told him that I also got so many personal messages of support from so many Filipinos. And I told you now that I'm so busy. For me, I make sure to answer everybody who writes to me. I have many friends here, and everybody is writing to me. And it's heartwarming that people care, but that Filipinos care about Israel. Of course, for me, the Philippines is so important, but I have to say that we are receiving now international support. You mentioned the statement of President Biden, and Secretary Blinken has arrived to Israel today, just I think about 1 hour ago, arrived to Israel as a message of standing with Israel. And we're now receiving also more and more visitors who are coming, but we can see strong international support in Israel after this evil attack.
With the recent increase in the threat level for Filipinos in Israel, what are the measures and precautions you recommend for the Filipino nationals to ensure their safety during this period of heightened tension in the region?
So we have announced in the entire Israel an emergency situation, which means schools are closed. No schools this week. Universities are closed. No cinema. Weddings have been cancelled. And only shops with essentials are open. Some shops are more, a few restaurants, but generally speaking, the public area is very quiet now. Less traffic on the road. And people are careful and recommended, and Filipinos are part of it. The recommendation is keep in a proximity to a shelter or to a safe room, what we call mamad, where in case there's a siren, follow the procedures and the protocol that every Israeli and every OFW and everybody in Israel know. When there's a siren going, there is also alarms to the different news channels. I mean, the radio, TV, everybody will be broadcasting it immediately, and people know wherever they live. They have a certain amount of time, depends on the distance from Gaza, to enter into the shelter. And my recommendation to them is follow the instructions. Be aware, be alert. Of course, take care of the person, your employer, but be alert. Of course, at this time, don't travel, and people don't travel, but don't travel close to the Gaza Strip. There's no reason to go there. People don't go. And I would say, secondly, I told also the president, Israel is open, meaning the airport is open. International flights are still operating. Of course, many airlines have cancelled because much less traffic. Unfortunately, Israel, it's the Holy Land, as you know. We have pilgrimages, we have Jewish tourists, we have other tourists. It's a fascinating country. So of course now much less people are visiting, but there are still flights coming in and out of Israel from different destinations, and we're making sure that the airport is open and is protected. And if somebody wants to leave the country, he can leave the country. It's a liberal democracy. He can buy the tickets. He can go back home. There's no restrictions, no limitations.
So it's open.
It's open. Israel is open, and if somebody wants to leave, he can leave. Although, as I said, I was very happy to.
Are there any, like for example, in flights, are there any extra security measures in place at the airport?
The airport has always all kinds of protections, which I do not want to specify.
Of course. Yes.
But the airport is considered a strategic asset, and we always make sure that the airport is well protected. So flights are still coming in. As I said, less, but it's still possible to fly to quite a few destinations, of course, so people can get home if they want to. So Israel is open. On the other hand, as I told the president, of course, people who stay, they're part of us. I can tell you that there are Filipinos in some places closer to the south that the hosting organization that they're working for made sure, even before the fighting was over, to get to them. Those who want to go out went out, and to bring them supplies of food and to make sure that they're okay, that they feel safe, they're following the protocols. So we are doing everything to make them feel part of us, that they're not left aside, that we care for them, and we do.
The scale and intensity of this Hamas assault have drawn comparison to the 9/11 attacks in the U.S. Ambassador, we have heard of harrowing reports of, as you said earlier, Hamas gunmen entering small towns, kibbutzim, indiscriminately killing residents. Could you provide some personal insights into how these tragic events have affected the people in the area?
Yes.
Overall sense of security, how are they coping?
Well, I mean, a few of those kibbutzim, such a big percentage of the members were killed, were murdered. So I think the psychological effect is terrible on them, of course, on the survivors. But at this stage, we are in the process of, we're not in the process, we're in the mindset of we have to be strong. So people are totally united in supporting each other, and you see the empathy, you see the sense of patriotism. People are opening the homes. Where I live in Israel, it's a relatively safe town, I would say, a city. And in my community, first I would say in my community, probably about 100 of the youth of my community were called into the reserve service in order to either fight or be in the northern border, whatever. So they were called into the service, and people are volunteering to give them supplies if they need to give them a ride. A lot of initiatives to help the soldiers, to help the families left behind, but also people opening their homes for foreigners, not foreigners, for people they do not know from the south who are seeking to move away to feel safer. Because some of them don't want to stay such close to the border, and people are opening the homes and inviting them to stay there. They don't know them, strangers. And the neighbors are bringing in food, extra clothes, medicines, activities for the children in order to engage with them, and psychologists who are coming to help. It's really, I mean, very difficult. I mean, emotionally, it's a very difficult time, but we are, as people, we are very, very united. So some of those communities have been totally evacuated. Other towns, people who want to be evacuated will be evacuated, and we'll find for them places to stay in hotels or with families. A lot of Israelis are traveling back home to join the reserve army in order to, of the sense of we want to protect our homeland. So I think this is when you asked me about what is happening to the Israelis. First of all, there was shock with this scale, unimaginable. It is a September 11 of Israel. It is. And then we have to respond. Military, but also socially, social support for the people who are being affected. Yeah, I'm sorry. I get very emotional because, you know, it's...
Ambassador, there have been questions about how Israeli intelligence, I mean, they're the best in the world, I mean, the top. How was it not able to detect certain actions or developments in the lead up to this assault?
There are so many questions
Yes.
to be asked about how this happened. But the time to answer those questions is not now. Now we are in a war. In a war, you have to focus, to concentrate on your goals. And the goal of Israel is to win this war. If we lose this war, and we didn't discuss about the strategic setting, if we lose this war, we have nowhere to go.
Yes.
So this is not the time to ask the questions, although they are being asked, but not into detail. It's in the air. But after the war, yes, there will be a lot of questions. I'm sure there will be committees looking into it. Luckily enough, the systems, things are in place. We were able to recover.
Yes.
And now we are fighting back, using our technologies again, and using them also to be smart in our response. As I said before, not to hit civilians. So now we're regaining control and we'll win this war. And after that, we'll ask no questions.
There's a recent development, though, a phone conversation between Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, where they discussed the military situation in Gaza and raised questions about the dynamics in the region. Can you provide your perspective on the implications of this communication on the ongoing Israeli-Hamas conflict and how it may impact the regional dynamics, especially in light of the recent development with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announcing that there would be a normalization relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Yes. So it's an opportunity really to understand the setting of the Middle East. And I think here in the Philippines it's very important to understand because, you know, the Philippines, everybody recognizes the Philippines. You're a country to stay, you have your homeland, so many islands, big country, an amazing country, of course. And Israel is a country which until today is not accepted in the region. And what do I mean? When Israel was established by a UN resolution in 1948, when we announced our independence as a state, immediately what happened to us was that 7 Arab countries have announced war against this young country Israel of 1 day old. And luckily enough, with a lot of determination and ingenuity and imagination, we were able to defend ourselves and to survive this war. But since the 1948, we had the 1956 war, the 1967 war, the 1973 war, and then other wars and attacks after that. These were the major ones. And luckily enough, we were able to survive. Israel is the only real liberal democracy in the Middle East. Look at what's happening in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, not to mention other countries. It's the only real democracy in the Middle East. Israel shares the same value as the Philippines, as the US, as many other countries. So since then, we were able to establish peaceful relations with Egypt in 1979, later on with Jordan. And 3 years ago, we signed the historical Abraham Accords, which finally were able to break through, and 3 more Arab countries signed full diplomatic relations with Israel. It is the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, it is Bahrain, and it is Morocco. This is putting the Middle East in a mode of change, of beginning, of really recognizing that Israel is a country to stay, that we can and should engage with it in a normal way, as a country, as a people. And they're also gaining a lot of benefits because of the Israeli innovation, Israeli technologies, not only on the defense and agriculture and water and many other aspects. Israel is a country that brings good to the world. Look at the number of Nobel winners in Israel, 12, in a country, in a population of 1.5 million people. How many papers and how much IP, so intellectual property, how many inventions are coming out of Israel? I'm sure you're using Viber. It's an Israeli technology. You use Waze or all kinds of technologies. Your iPhone has so many components of Israeli. So we are bringing good to the world. And I think the Arab world has realized that it's about time, not all of the Arab world, soon I'm coming to it now. But most of the Arab world has realized that it's about time to accept Israel that is going to stay there. We can actually work with Israel, and it will be in our benefit and the benefit of the Arab world. And Israel is a country which calls for peace. Maybe it's an opportunity to mention, we have a very famous prayer in our prayers. We end every prayer that we do, we end with the words which in Hebrew it says, Oseh shalom b'momav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. God in heaven who makes peace will bring peace on Israel, on the world, and say amen in short. Basically, we pray for peace, always. So we can see that this vision of having a peaceful Middle East is on its way. However, on the other hand, we have Iran, which Iran is also calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, developing a nuclear weapon, and we don't want to talk about Iran, but Iran is the main supporter of Hamas. And then let's talk about Lebanon and Syria. These are not exactly democracies, and southern Lebanon, which is sort of northern Israel, bordering northern Israel, southern Lebanon is controlled by Hezbollah, another terror organization that wants to destroy the state of Israel, and it's arming itself for so many years with a lot of missiles, a lot of technologies, and it's operating freely in southern Lebanon, basically preparing itself for the attack against the northern border. So Hezbollah is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Hamas is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Iran is doing the same. In Syria, to say from Lebanon, we already saw a few attacks in the last few days with casualties. And there are casualties on both sides. I mean, they attacked, of course we retaliated, but there are some casualties, unfortunately, yes. It's not big scale. We have casualties from the IDF, but there are some, meantime, incidents. It's not full-scale war, thank God. We hope it will not happen. From Syria, 2 days ago, we had also some attacks. Again, it's still contained. So you can understand that Israel is a small country which is surrounded in a very complicated region, which is still not accepting its very existence, with still organizations who are calling for destruction of the state of Israel and murdering the Jews. We are not safe. And that's the cause of the matter.
Now, the deployment of 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the Eastern Mediterranean, as commented on by U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, is seen as a deterrence measure against potential involvement of various state and non-state actors in the conflict, like Iran, including Hezbollah. While there have been suggestions, though unconfirmed, that Iran might have given the green light for certain actions, such as this, the assault. The U.S. has stated a lack of proof, though. Do you think Iran is involved?
So, I'm not in the intelligence, but I would say there are a few issues here that you asked me. First of all, Hamas and Hezbollah are financed and supported and guided by Iran. We know now some estimation on cryptocurrencies that are able to get money through crypto. Okay, both Hamas and Hezbollah. Iran is supplying weapons and different assistance. It's all brought in. There are different chains of supply from the sea, which we captured before. From land, we know there's a way from Iran. They come through Iraq, Syria, into Lebanon. So we know the supply chain, and we are always, our security services are doing the best to block the supply chain, but Iran is the main supplier and supporter. What happened? Did Iran give now a green light or not? It's not important. It is important, but not to the immediate situation. So we are into war against Hamas. Hamas has this atrocity, this terrible attack, was an announcement of war by Hamas, and we are now fighting back, protecting ourselves, and making sure Hamas will not attack again our civilians. The challenge or the threat now is what happens if Hezbollah would come into the war, and I think into the picture. And we had a small incident. So the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, is already deploying our troops, the reservists who have been called in, to make sure that the northern border is well protected by the Israeli armed forces. Of course, in the Golan Heights with Syria and across the country, that we can protect ourselves. But I think the US has come as the closest strategic ally to Israel, for Israel, and it announced very clearly. And I think the deployment of the aircraft carrier is a very strong message to the region. Don't go into full-scale war against Israel. Strong message to Iran, strong message to Lebanon and to Hezbollah, strong message to Syria. Let Israel fight this war against Hamas. Don't interfere, don't escalate. So I think this is a very strong message. Of course, for us as Israel, it's very important, comforting, and we appreciate very much, of course, this strategic alliance with the US.
How do you assess the potential for the ongoing conflict to further escalate or widen or spread to other countries in the region?
So again, I think we're doing our best not to have an escalation. By the way, you ask yourself, the leader of the Palestinian people is Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen didn't say anything against this terror attack. So what kind of message is it? But sorry, it came to my mind when you were talking more about the region and the leaders around it. So we really hope that there will be no regional escalation. Of course, Iran is probably maybe trying to do something, so they got a very strong message. We are preparing ourselves and will respond if we're attacked. Israel will respond in the most harsh way to protect itself and to make sure that it will be safe for the long run. We are not in panic, we are preparing, and we are delivering very strong and very clear messages.
Yes. Iran denies it was involved, but they praise the attack.
Iran totally praises the attack. By the way, Saudi didn't praise the attack.
No.
It had a very moderate statement. Also the UAE, sort of. So you can see, of course, there are phone calls between leaders. It's okay. We are facing a very complicated situation, horrific situation. People are suffering, and that causes the response. So there is a lot of, the Security Council met a couple of days ago. Nothing came out of the meeting. It's too early to come with any kind of decisions, and that's not the time yet. But everybody's talking to each other. So the Israeli message is very clear. Let us win the war against a terror organization called Hamas. I think we're getting full international support for that. The message to the other neighbors is specifically Lebanon and Syria, Hezbollah. Don't interfere. Also to Iran. Don't interfere. Don't create another front. Don't come into the war. Stay calm. Otherwise, there'll be full-scale war. And of course, we don't know what will happen, but we know that the IDF is a strong army. Israel is a strong country. It's important to, if we go back to history, the Jews were all persecuted for so many years. But we survived, 2,000 years of being a minority that has been prosecuted in different places in Europe. There's no history of this kind in the Philippines. But when you look at the history of the Jews in Europe, in North Africa, there is a history of persecution, the Inquisition, of course, the Holocaust, and then after that, the State of Israel, and I mentioned about the different wars. We are strong people. We are people who are calling for peace, but we will also be able to survive, to protect ourselves, and to move on. And I think this is also the sense in Israel. We are strong. We are now volunteering. We will support our country. We will support our people, and we will move on.
In the midst of the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, there have been concerns about the safety and well-being of hostages held in the region. Can you provide insights or updates on the status of any hostages, and what steps are you taking to ensure their release?
So we are studying the footage and trying to gather information regarding the hostages. And as you said, they are not prisoners, they are hostages. They were kidnapped into Gaza. And who are they? Israeli elderly people, babies, children, women, men, anybody who they could get, and of course, also foreigners are there. So we would like to rescue them. What are the exact operational plans is difficult to say from here, but we are trying to gather the information and to come up with something. What exactly? This is something for the Israeli Defense Forces, but rest assured, if you look on the history, on the past, one important term that we have in Israel is a life of one person is like the life of the entire world. Saving one life is like saving the world, because this person will have a future family. So my father-in-law is a Holocaust survivor. Today he's so proud because he was able to establish a family and he has children. So his family did not disappear because of the Holocaust. So we believe in the importance and the value of life. So we'll take care, we'll do our best to get the hostages out of Gaza.
During these trying and extraordinary times, what message of hope or reassurance would you like to convey to the international community as a whole?
So I think my message is quite clear. First of all, we have suffered here an unprecedented terror attack, unhuman. No words can describe this evil force called Hamas. Hamas is a terror organization calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Israel will protect itself and will protect its civilians and its citizens and will make sure it doesn't happen again. Currently now, we are in a war situation. We will fight back and will make sure that this doesn't happen again. At the same time, we care about our people, our families, and we care about the foreigners who are with us in Israel. And my message also to the Filipino people is, we, the caregivers, are part of our families, are part of our society. We'll do our best, as we do for our own people, to make sure that they are safe. And those who are captured, we'll do our best to get them out. To those who have unfortunately died, I do really want to express my empathy and my condolences to the family. My heart is with you. We know what it is to lose people for terror. And finally, also my message to the leaders of the international community, and in this case also to President Marcos, to express our appreciation for the global support and for the support of the Philippines to Israel at these difficult times. But I think we are all united as liberal democracies in the fight against terrorism, which reminds us of ISIS. And in the Philippines, you know what ISIS is. And we are united in this global fight against terrorism. Unfortunately, in this case now, it is Israel fighting for its people to make sure that they are safe from terror again. I think for me this would be my message. And maybe one last word I wanted to say is, and I feel it now very strongly, sort of, Israelis and Filipinos are very much alike. Generally speaking, we share the same values of life, of the importance of the family, of opening your house for guests, of course of eating.
Of course.
But also that when something bad is happening, both also in the Philippines and also in Israel, there is a sense of solidarity and supporting each other. We are all becoming brothers and sisters. And this is what's happening today in Israel. And I feel that the same thing is radiated from the Philippines to Israel, that you are with us. And I want to say thank you very much for being with us at this difficult time.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Fluss, your willingness to share your perspectives on this complex and very sensitive matter is greatly appreciated, and your insights have provided valuable context and understanding of the conflict, including our hope for the safety of hostages and everyone in Israel and everyone living there. We join you in the hope for peace and stability in the region. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.